Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine. Not that I wish.
There are a good handful of games that, if they didn't exist, gaming just wouldn't be the same. It would be weird to me if those games didn't exist. And you could argue, well, you wouldn't know what you were missing if they didn't exist, so why does it matter? That's true, but I wouldn't want them to not exist because so many other games, amazing games by the way, so many other genres have been heavily influenced by those games. I think about stuff like Metal Gear Solid, Mario Bros. 3, Link to the Past, Resident Evil 2, GoldenEye 64, Perfect Dark 64, Mortal Kombat, Tomb Raider, and of course, Half-Life 2. Let's take a look.
Everybody else.
Some of you that know me, and you know me pretty well, you know that there was a time when I used to say that Half-Life 2 looked better than most of the stuff that I owned. I love the Source engine, and I still think that this game looks really, really good. It definitely looks dated by whatever standards have been set, whatever bars have been raised, and the PC that I had at the time of its release couldn't really run Half-Life 2 all that well. It didn't really look all that great. Amazingly, thanks to Valve and different parts of the community, the tweaks and improvements that have been made over the years to the game itself, as well as the engine itself, have made this game look better than it ever has, with Episode 2, in my opinion, being the most visually impressive of the bunch. It's interesting for me because the more that I think about it, my favorite looking Source game is probably still Left 4 Dead, for a lot of reasons. Portal 2 is really visually impressive. That game looks super clean, but you can look far back and you can see the vision that they had with Half-Life 2 and some of those earlier demos, how they were trying to push the industry forward, and I think they accomplished that. There's a lot of character models that look great in this game, and a lot of textures that I think still look pretty good for the time, but Alyx and her character model in particular has always put a smile on my face. The facial expressions and the amount of detail possible for a game of this age is, to me, still very impressive. I don't really see a lot of gamers usually talk about Valve and have them up on that pedestal the same way that they do a lot of other developers, but there was a time when, yes, they did have amazing visuals and they had really awesome animations at the time for their games, but in my opinion, yes, Valve deserves a lot more credit because there weren't a lot of games at the time of release that looked better than this. Gamers would continue to talk for years about how games like the original Crysis can still look amazing after all this time, and it does for a lot of reasons, but Half-Life 2 is often left out of conversations like that, and it doesn't seem like it's ever going to change. It's a really awesome combined effort with, Valve's artists and, their technical experts to have some really cool lighting, awesome animations, especially the facial work done on some of the faces to really bring these characters to life, but also the effort that went into, gun animations. Some of these weapons are truly unique, and I think Valve seems to understand what gamers want before we do. Again, there's many things that still impress me, many things about this visually that I still think look very good, but I'm not expecting anyone playing this for the very first time in 2021 to be blown away if you've experienced what the AAA industry has offered over the last decade or so. It's special to me, and many things about it, as well as the DLC. The DLC, in particular, Episode 2, again, very appealing to my eyes after all this time. Few games in history were as ahead of their time as Half-Life 2 and its gameplay. This would be one of the first moments in time that I can remember where things like physics could be taken a lot more seriously and play a huge role in the experience. Regenerating health systems were becoming more and more of a thing, and Half-Life 2, for the most part, left its own mark and much of that behind. It felt new, but also familiar in many ways if you enjoyed older shooters. The bar had been raised so ridiculously high after Half-Life 2, it seems like even Valve doesn't know how to make something better, because as good as Episode 1 and Episode 2 are, we still don't have a sequel to this amazing game. This game had such a huge influence on the industry, and its mechanics, as far as I'm concerned, still hold up today. Nothing is boring about the gameplay in Half-Life 2 almost 2 decades later. Everything that you're given is fun to use and can all be situational depending on the enemies you're up against. And it's not just shooting or worrying about what enemies you'll face around the corner. It's also puzzles in the environment that you'll need to solve to move forward. I think about items like the crowbar early on, which is sort of taken on a life of its own and become iconic all by itself. But later in the game, you'll find yourself probably not using it as much, especially after the gravity gun enters your inventory. The gravity gun it truly is a game changer, and it will change absolutely everything, and especially your approach to combat. The world is your oyster at that point, and it's beyond useful. Combat or puzzles, the gravity gun allows for so much fun. Running out of ammo with one of your favorite guns? The gravity gun has you covered. You can pick up tables and throw them at your enemies. Pieces of wood that you've busted up with the crowbar can be used. There are conveniently placed propane tanks to throw. Paint! You can actually throw paint canisters and do damage. This gun allows for so many different options, and to be honest, I probably haven't played with them all. I mean, hell, there may even be situations where you can get lucky and roll a car on top of an enemy. How cool is that? Gordon can also use the gravity gun to pick up things like grenades that have been thrown his way, and then later, well, you know what? I won't spoil that, but I will say that things just become so unfair for the Combine much later in this game. I love this gun, man. I do. Obviously, there's other weapons to choose from in the game, like the very first pistol you're given, but that isn't as useful later on, and I found myself using it less and less as the hours went by. Everything after that I love, and all of the weapons can be used for different reasons. Until you get awesome stuff like the gravity gun, the pistol can be used for things like head crabs, because you don't always want to use your better weaponry to take on more of the basic enemy types. Other times you don't really care and you want to play around a bit with the shotgun, which is excellent in this game. It has some really good punch to it, or the crossbow that's extremely powerful, even though I just seem to suck with these things in every game that has them. I usually prefer SMGs, and the one in Half-Life 2 is fine. It can be really good, but for me, it's missing something. That extra punch I like to hear, that extra punch I like to feel from my guns. But considering the age of the game and everything else that's accomplished, I'm not going to make it a big deal. Later in the game, you receive an item that helps with things like antlions and just them being less of a problem in general. This is honestly one of the better thought out mechanics in the entire game. You can have them kill enemies for you, distract turrets, or take all the damage so you can clean house with your other weapons. In terms of how you'll navigate and move throughout the game, there are some ever so slight platforming sections. You can obviously walk, you can sprint. There are a couple of boat sections. Some of them can be a little annoying even after all this time, in my opinion. And of course, last but not least, the car. The car is very useful, and later on it can be slightly upgraded to help with a lot of the resistance that you'll meet. There's also an ammo refill in the back, but it only ever seems to give SMG ammo. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. If you're looking for some of the more powerful stuff in the game, you're likely not going to find it here. You'll need to explore, bust open some boxes, of which there are many. There are so many ways to enjoy this game, so many ways to play. Some of the guns themselves have a really cool alternate firing mode, which you will want to try out, trust me on that. Especially when you're being overwhelmed with a large amount of combine or antlions. I'm telling you, these guys are not messing around. If you're not careful with where you step in some places in this game, or watching things like your ammo count, you are going to have problems. And not just with the combine, they can be rough, they can be annoying, but antlions are just, man, they annihilate everything. Games like this came at a time where regenerating health was still a bit of a process, and Valve decided, no, we're not going to hold your hand as much as some of these other guys. You will need to find and pick up all of your own health and ammo. I prefer my first-person shooters this way. Everyone is different, and after games like Halo, but it's just for me personally, I enjoy playing this way. Doom, Half-Life, Wolfenstein, to name a few. Nothing wrong with regenerating health systems and shields, but I think the way games like Half-Life do it is perfect. I like that Valve actually spent some time with having, awesome enemy variety, and some of those having a lot of abilities of their own. Ravenholm being this amazingly well done mixed bag of action, suspense, survival horror, just, useful traps. The atmosphere is so well done in that section of the game. Like a lot of other people, I'm sure it's one of my favorite sections of a game ever created. I'm not just saying this because I believe Half-Life 2 is one of my favorite games ever. I believe it to be a masterpiece. It's not just because of those things. I mean, you can look at a lot of games that you don't like and see the visuals or things with the gameplay or the sound design that you would like to see implemented into other games, other genres, and IPs that are your favorite. You can see the potential there, but with Half-Life, I feel this game could release today in 2021, just turn up the visuals to look a little more 2021, maybe improve the animations just a little, and I say a little because they're already great, and that, of course, depends on your preference, but I think that it would still be ultra successful, and a lot of gamers would still really like this game and really connect with how special Half-Life 2 is.
You citizen, come with me.
I'd suspect Barney of trapping and... My goodness. Gordon Freeman. It really is you, isn't it?
There's nothing Gordon can't handle, with the possible exception of you.
Dad, please.
For some people, I think the story in these Half-Life games is going to be a little hard to follow. I never spoil too much, and trust me, you're going to want to experience this great storytelling for yourself. I'd say Half-Life is about what it looks like. There are, some levels of time travel, other worlds, and not just other worlds, but other dimensions. Dimensions within dimensions, alien life forms, the research of these alien life forms and how that turned out to be a bit of a mistake. Traveling to other dimensions really has its consequences. Some of those alien life forms are with mankind. Others have their own interests at heart. You can get lost in it. We all love Gordon Freeman, but I can't help but think after playing this again, this masterpiece of a game, Alyx is the real star, and for me, always has been. She's my favorite, just extremely well-written, charming voice actress, and she's just likable. She's likable in general. There's nothing not likable about Alyx. And if you play the expansions to Half-Life 2, she only grows on you further. And then we have her father, Eli, who of course not only plays a huge role in the technology and research of these games, but is also a great man that loves his daughter and wants what's best for her. We also have what I would like to refer to in especially a game like Half-Life as role players. Sometimes, they're in the background chilling and they're not really doing much. They're just kind of there. And other times they're playing a huge part, a huge role in making this game what it is. You have people like Barney, Judith Mossman, and Isaac. Father Gregory in Ravenholm is quite special for me, and I wish we knew more about this character and could have spent more time with this character. Gregory is quite good because he's become a bit of a madman and is a guy that, I feel deep down feels a terrible amount of pain, given that he wasn't able to do more to protect the people in this town. The story is good. Sometimes it's really good. Easily one that requires a lot of your attention because there is a little depth here. Not my favorite story ever, but what is here helps one of the best games ever become even better. This is one of those rare moments, I think, in my reviews. It doesn't happen often where I feel like I need to mention the sound, if only for a moment, because if I don't feel like I'm doing Half-Life 2 all that much justice. So it's not just the terrific sound design in the environments, the voice acting being some of the best all time, all of the interesting weapon firing modes and the work done on reloading those weapons, but Half-Life 2 easily has one of the best soundtracks to ever grace video games. I think I bought the full digital album on Amazon, or most of the tracks, a long time ago, but it's a must-have as far as I'm concerned. It's very video gamey, and it's video gamey in the best possible ways that you can think of, and it brings Half-Life 2 to life in ways that would otherwise feel dull or completely lifeless in many sections of this game. Oh, you know, there's just so much more I feel like I could say about Half-Life 2. Everything I've said, a lot of you have likely heard 1,000 times, or I'm saying it in a slightly different way, but more or less means the same thing as the other guy. When I play games like Half-Life 2, I think to myself, you know, I think Valve set out to make a great game here, but there's no way in hell they knew it would be this big of a deal, especially all these years later. I'm telling you guys right now, I feel like Valve, they were wrapping up development and they were sitting there and they were like, well, we hope people like this. There's no way that they could have known the juggernaut that this would become. It's one of those games that always seems to make, you know, somebody's top 10 or top 20 best video games of all time type of lists. It's well deserved. The praise, the awards, the continued support of this IP from not only Valve, but us, the fans, as well. It's a very special game and one that I will never forget. If you like video games, which I'm assuming most of you or even all of you do, considering you're here watching this review, then you have to play this game, especially if you're into more of the gamey type of games and a little less so with the cinematic stuff, even though this game does have its cinematic moments. I am giving Half-Life 2 the 10 it deserves, and obviously I'm still holding out some hope that one day we'll be able to say that Half-Life 3 exists and it's been the sequel worth waiting for. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. There will be more. I'm sorry I'm slacking. Take care. Have a good one. Peace.